Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sunday for Week 6 of the Sootopolis City League. My name is Maeve. I am once again on the mic with Angela. We have some really exciting Spike Myth for our first match, and a lot like what Izzy said, it's almost that kind of bear metaphor where I don't have to have to run the fastest. I just have to run faster than the person behind me in order to make it into those playoffs for those next weeks.
Yeah, definitely. And with regular season coming to a quick ending here in the next few weeks, the teams are looking to get those last few wins to secure their spots.
Yeah, and I think this first match is going to be really interesting as well. I know we'll be able to feature a couple of great teams from both of these, but taking a look right now, the Sunsteel Strikers and the Silage City Colossals, they're 3-3, but look at those win records, right? Sunsteel Strikers has 3 wins so far. Silage City only has 1. So if they're able to get a win over this team, that is going to be absolutely huge, not only just for morale, but for, the points to try and make sure that they can move on into those top 6 teams. So currently tied, they need to win 2 games to win fully, but if they still at least win 1, then that means they at least have a chance to tie and a chance for points.
Yeah, definitely. And the Silage City Colossals coming off I believe it was a tie last week. Yeah, they got their first draw last week, so they did get some points on the board, getting their first win in week 3. So looking to add on to their win total. And then Sunsteel Strikers, my team, coming off a loss last week, so we're looking to bounce back and get a win.
Yeah, and I know for your teammate Shao, he is going to be playing against a ck49, also known as Audie, and Audie himself is a really well-known player, very much, had a great season this year as well. One thing that's interesting about both of these players is they were both teammates in the NPA for NPA Series 10 in 2021, and they won under the Puppies, which I think is a really interesting thing to know. Audie, I believe, I don't know if he was the captain, but he is one of the most expensive drafted players this season. So you really have to hope that he does really well in this game, because this game has such high stakes.
Yeah, and Audi also having, notable in-person results as well, going top 8 at Vancouver Regionals, as well as some online events, winning the r/VGC Champion Series 6 tournament. So very impressive there.
Yeah, and for Shao as well on the opposite side. Like I said, NPA 10 champions with the Puppies, where he played with Audie. NPA 11 runners-up this year. And he was the VR World Cup manager for Team France, who placed in top 4 this year as well. So like you said, there is still that great online experience coming from both of these players. And their teams as well, I think, are really interesting for this Spike Myth Cup. Audie running that Garchomp, Sylveon, Celesteela, Incineroar, Togedemaru, and my brain just fried. Give me a hand here. Thank you, Cresselia. There we go. So I looked at it, and I've said it in the past. I said it a bunch the last few days. Shao, however, Serena, Tapu Fini, Heatran, Celesteela, Nihilego, and Whimsicott. So some similarities on both of these teams. However, you're not seeing either of the Urshifu or the Rillaboom. So a little bit of unconventional team picks here.
Yeah, definitely interesting teams. I personally love Audie's team. I love Garchomp, Celesteela, as well as Togedemaru. Those are some definitely interesting picks, especially in this format. And then you have the Hyper Offense team that was sort of popularized by our very own Kamikasa and some of the earlier Spike Myth Cups tournaments. So very excited to see how this one shapes up.
Yeah, and Audie has that Fairy Dragon Steel core with Garchomp, Sylveon, and Celesteela, which is one of those, when you're not talking Fire, Water, Grass, that's typically the other team core of 3 that you kind of think about, because they do play off of each other very well. Sylveon having the opportunity to just click Hyper Voice with that Pixelate ability just makes it pretty oppressive if you've got Pokemon on the other side of the field that take that damage pretty well. And I mean, if you're looking at it, you're still kind of facing off against something like, a Heatran that also has its own double targeting moves, but I think there's going to be interesting ways to kind of try and slow down this play if you're Audie to try and deal with that hyper offensive side, whether that just be switching that Incineroar around, if you can get Celesteela in and get it in a solid position, if you can get the Heatran off the field on the opposite side, then you're going to be, I think, moving pretty comfortably towards a good end game, even if it's a slow one where you're clicking Leech Seed every other turn, basically.
Yeah.
But getting into the start of this game, both of the leads for these trainers, I think it's going to be a really fun one. Tapu Fini, Serena, so a great way to stop some fun things like Fake Out on Shao's side, and Togedemaru and Garchomp for Audie.
Yeah, interesting leads here. The Togedemaru is an interesting pick for a Fake Out user. You definitely usually see something like a Rillaboom or an Incineroar, but we'll have to see how effective this Togedemaru is. Adi also going with the Garchomp, which doesn't love to sit in front of a Serena or a Tapu Fini. Tapu Fini has access to things like Dazzling Gleam, and I believe on this composition it's Choice Spec, so he's gonna have to watch out for that. And then Serena does have the capability to go for something like a Triple Axle, which will just take it out, although it might take some rough skin damage in the process.
Yeah, and I think Serena as well. One of those Pokemon that in different series you would see it paired with a Rillaboom and it would also run Grassy Glide, but you don't have any threat of that right now because there is no chance to change anything into grassy terrain whatsoever for either of these trainers, and I think Serena is going to be really nice to kind of put an end to some of the shenanigans that Audi may want to go for. Like I said, that fake out in other turns from the Incineroar, it's a great way to kind of stop that lead. Garchomp, though, feeling the fear here, brings in that Incineroar this turn. Intimidate not going to be all that important, I think, on the opposite side of the field. It's probably just here to try and take something like that Triple Axle that would have done that 4x super effective damage into the Garchomp. Togedemaru also switching here, so Audi completely changing both of his Pokemon here, bringing out the Sylveon on this turn as well. And that Tapu Fini going for a Moonblast, not going to love either of these targets here now, but the Incineroar still takes 50% of the damage, loses a special attack drop there. Not all too important, but Serena also going for a switch. U-turn into the Sylveon. Doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but once again is going to change these Pokemon on the field. We're already going to see almost all of the Pokemon that these trainers brought. And we know the 4 for Audi, and we're going to know 3 out of 4 for Shao by the end of this turn, and it's going to be Heatran.
Yeah, really interesting play there. The double switch from Audi was, definitely a defensive one. They were definitely expecting something like a Triple Axle into that Incineroar slot, but Shao going for kind of a middle ground play, going for a U-turn into that incoming Sylveon and just getting a free switch into Heatran. And this Heatran's in a really good position right now. Sylveon and Incineroar can only put on so much pressure, and that Incineroar might be in range of something like an Earth Power. And that Moonblast did quite a big chunk to Incineroar. I think that might almost guarantee specs on that Tapu Fini, and it was a pretty safe play from Audi, but Shao made the middle ground plays that got him a lot of damage on the board.
Yeah, and I think something that's interesting too, right, is Togedemaru is one of those Pokemon that can learn Steel Roller, which also, I believe, gets rid of the terrain. Not opting to go for that there does switch. Fake out into the Heatran, thanks to no Serena on the board, means you're not going to deal with any Queenly Majesty. However, this Moonblast into the Incineroar should be enough to pick it up. It actually isn't. It hangs on with 4 HP, so that must have been a pretty high roll and a pretty low roll on that damage there. Incineroar able to eat that Figgy Berry, holding a Pinch Berry there. Sylveon gets that Hyper Voice off, does a nice chunk of damage, most likely, like you say, that Choice Specs as well. For Sylveon, it's a pretty popular set.
Yeah, lots of damage coming out there from Sylveon. The Incineroar just deciding to go for the fake out, so the Heatran can't do anything this turn, but Adi's going to have to make a choice this turn because he's almost surely going to have something knocked out if he stays in. The Incineroar should be in range of an Earth Power, or the Sylveon might die to a double up from the, something like a Moonblast plus Heat Wave. So it'll be interesting to see here how they decide to pivot their Pokemon around to get in a better position.
No pivots here. Earth Power from the Heatran into that Incineroar is enough for the knockout. However, I think if you sent in something like that Garchomp, it wouldn't want to take a Moonblast either way. Does actually show a Life Orb here as well on the Heatran. Tapu Fini's Moonblast will go off into the Sylveon. Won't be doing as effective damage, but God, it still does so much there. Hyper Voice from the Sylveon once again does enough damage. Actually knocks out the Tapu Fini. Was that a critical hit there? I'm not actually sure. I don't believe so. But still a ton of damage moving forward, and that at least means that both of these trainers are going to get a free switch in here.
Yeah, we're seeing some wild damage rolls this game. Like you said, the Moonblast wasn't able to 2-KO the Incineroar, which, it seemed for sure after the first Moonblast, and then that Hyper Voice, the second one, actually picked up the knockout on the Tapu Fini, which, at first glance it didn't seem like it was capable, but, thanks to that choice specs, it was, and some damage rolls, it was able to get the knockout.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be pretty important moving forward, right? This Heatran on the opposite side of the field is pretty threatening to the Togedemaru, but it's not as bad for the Garchomp, right? And if you bring in the Garchomp, now that you've lost that big threat of Moonblast, Serena's still not a great Pokemon to face off in front of, I think, at this point, but you still have the option maybe to try and go for some big damage. I think enough, an extra piece of Hyper Voice there is probably going to do a nice chunk of damage to get the knockout onto the Serena, and you can maybe take an Earth Power.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if the Garchomp decides to go for something like a Rock Slide and just try and flinch the Serena, because at this point in the game, I don't think, the Sylveon should not be faster than the Heatran, so it probably won't be able to get an attack off before it's knocked out by something like a Heat Wave or a double up from the Serena, so we'll have to see how Adi sort of mitigates that damage or repositions in a way to get some speed on the board.
Yeah, and I think you're almost like you're happy to have the terrain for this Sylveon on the field, but it's not so fun for your Garchomp. You can't go for any of your Dragon type moves. Heatran switching out here brings in the Celesteela, another Pokemon that would love to sit in front of this Sylveon. Heavy Slam would be a great way to try and get some super effective damage off. Also revealing that is holding a Misty Seed, raising that special defense. Rock Slide connects on both of these targets. Like you said, it's a great way to just try and maybe go for a flinch on that Serena. Sylveon able to go first before it here, though, so pretty speedy, I think. Does do some nice damage onto the Serena. And Serena does flinch this turn, so a huge turn for Audie.
Yeah, that definitely spices things up a bit. I definitely wasn't expecting that Sylveon to be so fast, but it was able to get the Hyper Voice off, and thanks to that Rock Slide, Audie's in a pretty good position now to just sort of click those buttons again, get as much damage off with Rock Slide as possible, and just it should be able to take out the Serena at this range with a double up of Rock Slide and Hyper Voice, so actually in a pretty good position here.
Yeah, so long as you connect on that Rock Slide, right? You don't see any sort of super effective move that could go out into that Serena. I think the moves that we saw were Earthquake and maybe Draco Meteor, if I wasn't mistaken there. So either way, you're probably not going to get the damage that you want off. And if you go for the Earthquake, you hurt your Sylveon and you don't hit that Celesteela. Serena, though, knows it's in danger, is going to switch out here. Brings in the Heatran, who may be an interesting target for this Rock Slide, right? Who is going to go, but it does not connect onto the Celesteela. So Celesteela not in any range of flinching this turn. Heatran does take that Rock Slide there. And again, also Life Orb on the Garchomp as well. Hyper Voice from the Sylveon, not going to do a ton of damage into either of these Pokemon, and is not enough to get the knockout. Heavy Slam from the Celesteela, thanks to no flinch and no Rock Slide connect into the Sylveon, should be plenty enough damage to get that knockout.
Yeah, a bit of an unfortunate Rock Slide miss there on the Celesteela, but fortunately for Audie, they did get the connect on the Heatran. I think Audie is in a position here where they should be able to just sort of click Rock Slide and an Electric move with Togedemaru and finish off this game. You definitely have the speed advantage on their side, and even if with the Serena in the back, you don't necessarily need to click something like a Fake Out this turn, and thanks to that boosted damage from the Life Orb, Rock Slides and Electric moves should be able to pick up this win.
Yeah, I'm wondering, right, if you go for a Nuzzle into the Celesteela, because in case that switches out, or I'm assuming maybe you want to take that knockout with the Heatran, get the Serena in for free, unless you possibly just send in the Serena in the Heatran spot, bring in the Heatran later to take an attack. That way you at least completely mitigate things like Fake Out from that Togedemaru, but I think it kind of depends, right? Just in terms of what you want to go for. If you go for something like a Nuzzle, though, into the Celesteela, or into, in that slot ends up switching into the Serena, you might be in a really nice spot, especially if you can get some paralysis, especially before something like a Leech Seed goes off. But Celesteela is going to protect this turn. No switches coming out from Shao's side of the field. Dragon Claw from the Garchomp there. It does connect onto that Heatran. That is enough to get that knockout. Fully accurate move, not relying on any misses like that Rock Slide. And it's a really nice target, I think, as well, because you're not going for something that could possibly miss. Zing Zap going into the Protect on the Celesteela, not going to matter here.
Yeah, like you said, Audie not risking the miss on the Rock Slide there, just going for the safe Dragon Claw, and Heatran wasn't low enough to get the KO. The Zing Zap goes into a Protect from the Celesteela. I don't know if Zing Zap at this range will actually pick up the Celesteela in one shot. I think you probably have to go for something like a Rock Slide as well. Celesteela is very bulky, and Togedemaru is not the strongest little mouse in the world. But it looks like Shao's actually going to go ahead and forfeit the match. They realize that maybe Zing Zap is just too much for them to overcome.
Yeah, I think it becomes a bit of a long end game without a really good end in sight. You have to probably rely on a couple critical hits. You know your Pokemon are slower. If Audie is able to go for something like any sort of paralysis with a Nuzzle there, then you're already putting yourself at a big disadvantage. So I think at that point too, you're controlling a lot of the information on your side of the board. We didn't really see a lot coming out of that Serena. It kind of just took hits and switched in and out. So, I think at that point you're still kind of keeping your Serena set hidden, which can be helpful for those next games. You also have the opportunity, I think now, especially if you're Audie, to maybe bring something else, knowing that Serena came. You may want to bring your own Celesteela, then you can go for some Earthquakes with your Garchomp. You're moving pretty quickly in comparison to all the Pokemon on Shao's side of the field.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, the Celesteela seems like a pretty good pick here. Shao only has what seems to be the Heatran to sort of wall that Celesteela, maybe some damage from the Tapu Fini. But yeah, overall, I thought it was a pretty well-played game from both sides. Audie definitely had the pieces to win in the end there with some speed advantage, so we'll have to see how they adjust in game 2.
Yeah, and I think the adjustment is going to be pretty important here. Shao probably going to have to adjust. If you know that Audi has a good chance of bringing something like that Celesteela, do you just keep the same 4, knowing that bringing the Heatran and just maybe preserving the Heatran in the back helps you a little bit more here? Audi's lead, I'm sure, is going to change. Serena Celesteela from Shao this turn. Interesting to kind of see the Serena sticking around in this turn. Togedemaru and Garchomp once again for Audi. So the same exact lead, but it looks like he may want to switch once more.
Yeah, the Serena on Shao's side preventing anything like a fake out, and the Celesteela is at full this time, so I don't believe something like a Zing Zap will do too much damage in combination with the Rock Slide. So we'll have to see if Audi decides to sort of pivot out into something like the Incineroar to get Intimidates. We can see also that they have that Cresselia in the back, so maybe going for something like a Cresselia endgame with something like a Calm Mind. But on Shao's side, they're putting on some decent offensive pressure with the Triple Axle, and the Celesteela is not under too much danger. Like I mentioned, it does have that Togedemaru staring it down, but otherwise it could go for something like a Leech Seed.
Yeah, this is probably a perfect turn to just try and get some Leech Seeds. Try and set yourself up early. You know that Audi's probably going to have to switch out the big attacker in that Garchomp. Incineroar coming in will at least get that Intimidate down and give you opportunity for a Flare Blitz on the next turn if need be. But at that point, still, you have the opportunity to just go for something like a Leech Seed and just start making yourself really dangerous. However, Celesteela also going to switch out here, brings in the Whimsicott instead. So I think Shao realizing how important that speed was in game 1. Spiky Shield from the Togedemaru, not trying to take any attacks on this turn. U-turn from the Serena actually goes into that Spiky Shield here. It's not going to be able to get out of the field and does take a little bit of damage as well.
Yeah, good call there from Audi, just going with the damage mitigation and Intimidate with Incineroar, and just protecting that Togedemaru so it doesn't lose its sash, and also doing some damage in the process. With Spiky Shield, something that is pretty exclusive to Togedemaru, so it's pretty cool to see that here. But now Shao has access to Tailwind with the Whimsicott, and can just now U-turn out safely with the Serena. It's still not at risk of anything like a fake out, but you have to wonder if Audi might go for something like a Flare Blitz just to do as much damage as possible.
Whimsicott's going to protect here, though, not trying to take any damage. Togedemaru's Nuzzle will actually go into the Serena this turn. Just little tiny bits of damage here, but you are doing nice things with that paralysis. The Serena's going to be slow, even with a Tailwind. Parting Shot also goes into that Serena this turn, so Audi being really careful in not targeting into that Whimsicott. You are lowering that attack stat on the Serena as well. This thing is not happy on the field.
No, definitely not, and I really like that Nuzzle play there from Audi. Just saying, if you click Tailwind, I'm going to paralyze whatever comes in, unless it's named Tapu Fini, and I'm also going to get a Parting Shot off and get something that can deal some more damage in, like this Garchomp.
Yeah, Garchomp does get a little extra rough skin chip for that U-turn as well, which I think is so funny, right? All this damage from that Serena has just been these little itty-bitty pieces here. Tapu Fini coming in, though, means that Nuzzle is now off of the field at this point, as well as that Fake Out. So you'd have to go for something like that Zing Zap, which I think at this point now, Audi has also revealed all of the moves. I don't actually know if he's revealed Fake Out at this point, interestingly enough, but at this point now, you do have the opportunity to go for some super effective electric-type attacks. Garchomp's probably not going to want to stay in here. You could make a comfortable switch back into Incineroar just to have that fire type there, but you could also switch it in for this last Pokemon that we know is Cresselia.
Yeah, definitely. Audi's a bit threatened at this point because Shao does have the ability to just click Tailwind and something like Dazzling Gleam or even a Muddy Water in this position. So yeah, like you mentioned, probably going to want to switch into something a bit more defensive, maybe that Cresselia. The opportunity for Trick Room is also very useful for them as well, so that the Garchomp and the well, I guess we just saw the Togedemaru and Incineroar, so not a ton of offensive pressure in Trick Room necessarily, but definitely want to get that speed advantage.
Yeah, and I think by sending in something so bulky, you're at least putting yourself up for a good position against something like this Tapu Fini, who can put out that damage, even the Celesteela on the opposite side of the field. Whimsicott able to go for that Tailwind this turn is going to boost the speed on Shao's side, which I think is a really nice thing to prioritize. Moonblast once again from the Tapu Fini, targets down into that Celesteela, into the Cresselia here, still does a good chunk of damage. That Zing Zap, though, from the Togedemaru does a great amount of damage, almost 3/4 there, and that is going to put the pressure on Shao, even if that Togedemaru is moving last.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised by the damage output of that Tapu Fini onto the Cresselia, but then I was even more surprised by the Zing Zap damage on the Tapu Fini. That little mouse can certainly pack a punch, but I think I think Adi has a pretty safe Trick Room here if they want it, unless that Whimsicott has something like Taunt, but I believe the Whimsicott on this team usually has Encore and Protect like we just saw. So I think the Trick Room is pretty safe. You have to wonder if it's able to live a double up of Whimsicott Moonblast plus Tapu Fini Moonblast, especially given how much the Tapu Fini just did. But otherwise, yeah, I think if Adi's able to get the Trick Room up, this game should swing around for sure.
Yeah, Tapu Fini switching out here, though, knowing that it doesn't want to deal with some more Zing Zap damage. Serena coming in. Togedemaru actually going for a spiky shield here, so just a comfortable protect play, maybe just trying to allow for that Cresselia to do what it needs to do and just try and take some attacks like that Moonblast from the Whimsicott. Trick Room from the Cresselia, though, is going to mean that this Togedemaru is like this is the next slowest thing on the field and will be able to get some big attacks off. You don't, now looking at that moveset, we don't see anything like that Steel Roller, so now you know that there is no way to change that terrain back to normal.
Yeah, definitely. I like that play from both sides because Adi's doing a great job of protecting the Focus Sash on Togedemaru by just going for that Spiky Shield and successfully was able to get the Trick Room up. And Shao's now able to get in there Paralyzed Serena, which should be the fastest thing on the field now, even with the Tailwind up. So you pretty much have a free high jump kick into that Togedemaru slot if you want to risk it. But yeah, pretty interesting turn here overall. The Cresselia is at risk of an Encore though, so we'll have to see if they decide to play around that.
Yeah, Cresselia, like you said, at risk. However, that Togedemaru is going to switch out for the Incineroar. There is no side paralysis here to try and slow your own Pokemon down. Intimidate from the Incineroar onto both of the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field. Still no opportunity for Fake Out. Encore from the Whimsicott into that Cresselia is a pretty nice way to get out of this Trick Room pretty early. Serena, though, paralyzed this turn, full paralysis. Trick Room once again going off here, so I think Adi may want to leave that Cresselia in for one more turn and then try and switch it out.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's pretty free at this point to just do that, right? Because the Cresselia is almost certainly not going down this turn, and, you know, maybe you want to be a bit faster on this specific turn with Incineroar, though the Tailwind's up, so I'm not sure that matters too much. But yeah, you could just stay in and click Trick Room again and go for something like a Parting Shot and get something that's even more offensive in. Looking on Shao's side, their Serena was paralyzed, which was very unfortunate, but they went for that safe Encore play. So maybe this turn they can go for something like a high jump kick or maybe a U-turn into the Cresselia to just get some chip damage.
Yeah, I think a U-turn would be really nice here, right? Because then you can send in something that may possibly be slower, but you still have your slowest Pokemon on the field in that Serena, unless you end up sending in something like the Celesteela. Moonblast from this Whimsicott into the Cresselia here still does a good little chunk of damage, but Cresselia holding a berry, and that is going to help heal it up, especially if it was going to take a big attack from that Serena on the opposite side of the field, like a U-turn. U-turn into that Cresselia really actually does way less damage than I thought that it would here. Serena is sending back to Shao, gonna have the opportunity now to bring in something I think a little bit different. If it's that Celesteela, even with Tailwind, I think is going to still be moving pretty slow in a way that it can take advantage of Trick Room. Tailwind doesn't have too many turns left either, but instead is going to be that Tapu Fini. So Tapu Fini at this point may try and take something like a Flare Blitz from this Incineroar, and that would be a great way to stop some of this damage and maybe still hang on here, and you do hang out with just a tiny sliver of HP.
Yeah, I really like that play there. Just going for the Flare Blitz into the Serena slot, because even if this Tapu Fini switches in, like you see here, the Trick Room is now up again thanks to that Encore from the Whimsicott into the Cresselia. So this Incineroar is in a pretty free position to just keep attacking that Tapu Fini slot, and now Adi should be able to successfully switch out the Cresselia and avoid another Encore or have to click Trick Room again. So very interesting turn here. We'll have to see what that last one is for Shao as well to see if they can put him in a better position.
Yeah, I think too as well, if you are Audi, you have the opportunity now to send in something that can take advantage of Trick Room. If you can get rid of this Tapu Fini out of the way, then you can probably send in something like your Garchomp on later if you need to, because Garchomp's gonna be in a pretty good position. Flare Blitz coming out from the Incineroar means that there's no Trick Room this turn, interestingly enough. Or no switch out from the Cresselia, interestingly enough. So that means that you're still going to be getting that Trick Room ending on this turn. Whimsicott's Moonblast, though, going into that Incineroar, doing a little bit of chip damage there, and another Trick Room. So I wonder if this is maybe the time to send in something like that Garchomp now that the Tapu Fini is off the field and the Encore is ended.
Yeah, I think we're slowly approaching a record of the number of Trick Rooms in successive turns. So very interesting to see why Audi decided to leave this Cresselia, and maybe they're just banking on that paralysis on the Serena, giving them some speed control. But yeah, I think they're able to just click Trick Room again. Maybe that Serena's U-turn will do more damage this time. That's not intimidated. But yeah, it's very interesting to see how this game plays out.
Yeah, I mean, you have the opportunity, right? There isn't going to be any more terrains. You can go for something like a hard switch. You can then probably send in something like your Garchomp, try and get some damage off. But then in the meantime, you still have the opportunity with your Cresselia. You could go for a helping hand if need be. I think at this point it becomes really interesting, right? Because does Trick Room truly benefit you enough if you can get enough damage onto that Whimsicott, depending on if it is something with a sash there, a focus sash. But if not, that Whimsicott's still going to take 2 hits. Cresselia switching out here brings in the Togedemaru, and I think the Togedemaru is a great way to maybe try and get some damage onto that Whimsicott possibly. Garchomp coming out instead as well, so a full double switch back into those first 2 Pokemon we saw at the beginning of the game. Tailwind once again going up here, so Shao calling that there would not be another Trick Room there. High Jump Kick into the Garchomp does a ton of damage. Rough Skin once again just getting these little tiny pieces of chip damage onto that Serena, but that means at this point, right, they are going to be moving faster than you this turn.
Yeah, definitely. That Whimsicott is surely the fastest thing on the field, and you're still immune to fake outs thanks to the Serena. But I'm curious what this Garchomp's going to do here, because if you switch out, you're going to take a lot of damage on the chipped Incineroar and Cresselia, and the Serena is still the slowest thing, but like it just seems very awkward because your Garchomp, that slot is in a lot of danger of a Moonblast, and the Togedemaru can only do so much. Maybe something like a paralysis onto the Whimsicott, or Zing Zap's not going to do too much to the Serena. So very interesting.
Yeah, I wonder if you send in your Cresselia and you hope for a high jump kick miss or a full paralysis. Just at that point, it may be kind of your only option to kind of get yourself into a more comfortable endgame. Celesteela, though, is going to switch in here for the Serena. Hard switch here, no U-turn. Whimsicott protecting this turn as well, so you're already spending your first turn of Tailwind being very defensive. Garchomp also going for a protect. This would actually have been a great turn to go for something like a Zing Zap into that Serena slot, but the Nuzzle into the Whimsicott is not going to do it.
Yeah, and I don't believe the Celesteela is putting on a ton of offensive pressure this turn, but that Whimsicott certainly is, so Adi's going to have to do some evasive maneuvers for sure to sort of avoid a KO this turn, because something like a Heavy Slam plus Moonblast into that Garchomp slot will almost surely take a KO. Maybe not to the Incineroar, but it'll still do a lot of damage, and like I mentioned before, this Togedemaru is only putting on so much offensive pressure. It could go for something like a Nuzzle or Zing Zap into Celesteela, but if Shao goes for a switch out into the Serena, it could get a little weird.
Yeah, Garchomp switching out here. At least it's only going to be taking, possibly a Moonblast. So you can send in another option here. Whimsicott's Moonblast, though, will still do a pretty good chunk of damage to that Cresselia, even though it's not exactly the most offensive of Pokemon. Leech Seed from that Togedemaru from the Celesteela onto the Togedemaru. Zing Zap as well in return. Zing Zap into that Celesteela does 50%. So you cannot take another one of those. Actually, you know what? You probably can, thanks to this Leech Seed. Might be your only reason you're hanging on. But Cresselia has the opportunity to go for something like a helping hand, and then you just ignore that Whimsicott entirely.
Yeah, pretty safe play there from Shao, just going for the Moonblast damage onto the Cresselia, and then getting that Leech Seed down was really important, as we saw there. Yeah, just avoiding that 2-hit KO on the Celesteela, and I don't believe this Whimsicott is actually capable of holding the helping hand anymore, or never mind. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Adi's able to live 2 hits and get us something like a Trick Room up.
Yeah, I think Celesteela protecting here makes quite a lot of sense. You're not dealing with another sort of Zing Zap or a Nuzzle going out. Whimsicott's Moonblast will once again connect this turn. Goes into the Togedemaru instead. Togedemaru handles that pretty comfortably, but still a critical hit.
Wow.
So still a lot of damage. You get a special attack drop as well. Zing Zap from the Togedemaru into that Celesteela. Does not go through that protect. Icy Wind, though, from the Cresselia will hit into the protect once again on the Celesteela. Gotta hope it hits this Whimsicott, and it does, because that is your first step to really breaking that focus sash, and that is a huge piece of challenge really that this Whimsicott has been posing, because it's been able to sit unchallenged on the opposite side of the field. Yeah,
definitely, and this Celesteela is going to keep racking up some HP thanks to that Leech Seed. This Whimsicott actually proving to be a very pesky Pokemon for Shao. It's generally a frail Pokemon, but it's sticking around and doing a lot of damage. So the Icy Wind helps out for sure, but with Tailwind still up, this Whimsicott's going to be the fastest thing on the field, and a double up into that Cresselia slot still might be able to pick up the KO. We'll have to see if Adi decides to go for something like a Helping Hand Zing Zap into that Celesteela to try and get the KO.
Yeah, Celesteela actually switches out here, brings in the Serena. I believe Tailwind ended on that last turn, so Whimsicott's probably going to want to go for something like a Tailwind this turn. Helping Hand will go first, though, thanks to priority to help that Togedemaru, who's going to go for a Zing Zap. So no Tailwind, I think, coming out from the Whimsicott this turn. Serena just takes a little tiny chunk of damage. Whimsicott just goes for another Moonblast here, trying to just get that damage onto this Togedemaru. Does not do enough, but I think this Leech Seed may be enough to finish off this Togedemaru if you're pretty lucky. Yeah, and that is going to get rid of the Pokemon that was your real big threat to the Celesteela on the opposite side of the field.
Yeah, and that critical hit on the Moonblast proven to be very important there, just allowing the double up with two Moonblasts to pick up the KO in hand with Leech Seed. So a bit unfortunate for Adi there, and putting Shao into a bit of a better position because you can still go for something like a Tailwind and just try and get as much damage off as possible with Serena, although you probably won't be able to get an attack off with the Garchomp on the field, but Celesteela looking very good in the back for Shao.
Yeah, and I think it probably is really going to just be happy to come in here, get into another spot on the field, set up another Leech Seed if it wants to. Garchomp probably not going to be able to do a whole lot. You may just have to force yourself into being in this Rock Slide endgame, but you're probably still going to deal with something like a Tailwind this turn. You know, this could be a Helping Hand or an Icy Wind Rock Slide turn. Just try and slow these Pokemon down on the opposite side of the field, make the Tailwind obsolete, go for some Rock Slide flinches, maybe try and put Serena into a spot where it can't do a whole lot. I mean, at this point, right, you don't have any opportunity for Fake Out. I think you still got that Incineroar in the back as your last Pokemon, so you need to get the Serena off the field before Incineroar can really do anything that it wants to do. But Serena's going to take itself off, going to switch in for the Celesteela, who still has so much of that HP left thanks to all of those Leech Seeds. Garchomp going to protect this turn, just try and take things a little bit slower, maybe try and prevent this Whimsicott from doing some damage with the Moonblast this turn like it just did. Going to be a Psychic coming out from the Celesteela, though, from the Cresselia into that Whimsicott. Does do a little bit of damage there, but it's still not enough to get that knockout. This Whimsicott has been hanging really tough in here.
Yeah, if you notice, actually, Adi only has about 30 seconds of your time left, so he's going to have to make his decisions pretty quickly here. But yeah, the Moonblast going into the Garchomp Protect, pretty good decision there from Adi to not let the Garchomp go down. And the Psychic actually did a pretty good chunk to the Whimsicott, and you know, the Whimsicott could go for something like a Tailwind, but the Celesteela might not be able to outspeed this Garchomp, so it'll be interesting to see who can take a knockout first, or if Adi runs out of time before we get to that point.
Yeah, and I mean, you really have to commend Shao for slowing this game down, right? Whimsicott able to get this Tailwind up, finally start to get things moving a little bit quicker, especially without an Icy Wind from the Cresselia. Heavy Slam, though, from this Celesteela into the Cresselia this turn does do enough to get that knockout. So at this point, right, if Adi was trying to play the timer, he currently does not have the Pokemon advantage like he would have. Celesteela's got a Beast Boost, so Garchomp's Rock Slide has got to do something here. But thanks to that Rock Slide, you're able to knock the Whimsicott out. But that Tailwind, I think, was really frustrating because you would have had the opportunity to, you know, had there not been a Tailwind, you would have gotten the knockout, but you may have still dealt with something like that Moonblast. So it becomes a really interesting endgame, right? Because you got to click your moves quickly, but the Serena, thanks to that paralysis, makes it a little bit tougher.
Yeah, definitely, and a really interesting endgame here. We have a 2v2, but the Incineroar's not able to go for something like a Fake Out, and thanks to that attack boost from the Beast Boost, the Celesteela is back at neutral, so it kind of comes down to if Adi decides to protect that Garchomp, or if Shao decides to double up that Incineroar, because something like an Acrobatics plus a High Jump Kick, which should be able to easily KO this Incineroar, but you know, if they wrongly predict that and go into the Garchomp, this game could get very interesting if the Incineroar goes for Flare Blitz into either slot.
Yeah, I think you have to protect this Garchomp here, right? Because Garchomp protecting means you're not taking super effective damage from either one. You avoid the Heavy Slam. You at least keep one Pokemon advantage. Heavy Slam targets into the Protect on the Garchomp, so they did not double target into that Incineroar. High Jump King for the Serena, though, does hit into that Incineroar. It is not enough to get the knockout. So Incineroar does eat this Figgy Berry. Nice to have this Figgy Berry at the very end as well, especially if you're going for a move like Flare Blitz that can get that recoil damage. And recoil from the Flare Blitz would have possibly been enough to knock you out anyway, but into the Celesteela, it's enough for the knockout, and that brings you into a really close endgame. You don't have to deal with something like another frustrating Leech Seed, and this Tailwind will probably end in a couple of turns, so you may just have to try and deal with it. 1 second of your time, and that is going to end this turn, so this is going to be a little bit tough, I think. I don't think Adi can pull it out, thanks to the way that your time and game timer works.
Oh, he actually gets an attack off and goes for a Dragon Claw. It looks like he got it off just in time? I'm not really sure what happened there. But the Garchomp goes off and the game is over, so very interesting ending there.
That's a weird one. That's super funky, I guess. He must have gotten that off like just in enough time and then was able to get the knockout. I don't know. It's your time. Even we dealt with this in like New Jersey regionals a couple of months ago where Wolf ended up winning based on a your time thing, but it ended up almost being like game timer. It was bizarre, right? So it's interesting to see it once again because you get so close to that end game. But man, Audie did not have a lot of time by the end of that. You're definitely trying. It's really interesting to see the high level play of the moves that he was able to pick and that call on protecting the Garchomp and having Incineroar live at the end from that high jump kick. You're playing against a couple of odds, right? You're playing against that Serena, I believe, getting fully paralyzed, and you're playing against the high jump kick missing. So it's a really easy call to make to just protect that Garchomp because then the Serena has a 25% chance to not move at all, and then also has a decent chance to just miss, and then you knock yourself out thanks to that high jump kick miss damage. I think also Evan said he was going to replay that clip for us possibly so we could get a good look at just seeing how close that timer was. Clicks with 0 seconds. It's pretty close, man. You have to assume that it's like right there, right? But pretty interesting, I think, at this point to see just how this endgame wrapped up for Audie. But man, what a wild few turns.
Yeah, I mean, taking his time there definitely proved to get him the win because he made the right calls. But God, yeah, I can't help but wonder how much that if the Celesteela went for something like maybe even just a heavy slam, something resisted to just get a little bit more chip onto that Incineroar, because if you go for something like an Acrobatics, you are at risk of proccing that berry that it had, and that would have healed it back up into a range the high jump kick wouldn't have. But I mean, how could you know? The high jump kick missed by 8 HP, so I mean, the fact that they were able to land it was amazing in itself, and then just barely missing out. But yeah, what a wild ending. I think the timer definitely hit 0 before they clicked their movements, but that's very interesting. Maybe it works like if you have time at the start of the turn, you're able to get one more turn off or something like that. But yeah, I mean, Audi definitely deserved that win. They played super well, and it looks like the Sunsteel Strikers and the Colossals are going to go ahead and draw for this week.
That is still a huge draw for the Colossals, right? Because now, even though they didn't pull out the win, they still get points, and points are just so important. You know, I'm sure the win would have been really nice to have, but it's huge for the Sunsteel Strikers to still hold them off. They still keep a very dominant position with 3 wins on the board, and I think that's going to be huge. I mean, especially for you guys moving forward, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, anything but a loss is good at this point. We just need as much points as possible. So, you know, we would have liked to get the win that game, but you know, it goes how it goes. So, we're happy to get the tie.
Yeah, and I'm sure having a really funky endgame like that, you and I are probably going to need to hit the rule books a little bit just to double check how that timer thing works. It must be something like if you run out, it's your next turn or something like that, but Audie able to snatch up that win. Just as the 60-second timer came up on the screen as well. So he was getting there. And that is truly commending to Shao for slowing that game down and definitely trying to play to an out that I think he needed to work towards. But either way, huge congrats to both of these players. Huge congrats to both teams for that tie. We will be taking a very short break, and then we will be back with another match for the day. And this one is going to be Series 13, so don't go anywhere.